We're here at COP27 in Sharm El-Sheikh. Today is Finance Day and we're joined by Nicole Martens from Old Mutual Investment Group. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell me a little about what's happened here today on Finance Day and has it been up to your expectations?
Well, so far so good. There's a real palpable energy for Finance Day. It's the day where we're expecting to see a lot more commitments like the kind that were made last year, but also where I think we're hoping to see a lot more discussion around the nuts and bolts of implementation. What does that actually look like? So far, the discussions have been really interesting where we're touching on some of the important topics. So using the right tool for the right job. So where are we going to use concessional finance? Where is grant financing going to be making more sense? Where do we need philanthropy to step in? So we're talking about all the right things. We're circling around some actual implementation plans, and I'm hoping by the end of the day we'll see some commitments to real action points.
And how do all of these conversations fit with Old Mutual's vision in Africa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Old Mutual Group and Old Mutual Investment Group, as a responsible investor and a long-term institutional investor, we're really always looking for ways that we can invest in creating stability and resilience and sustainability in the market. We're very focused on the idea of the just transition and how do we steward our investments in our current portfolios from where they are to where they need to be in the time that they need to get there. So this kind of discussion is really helpful for us as well to be able to contribute to look out for potential partners, for collaboration, for engagements that are focused on really the practicalities, so being pragmatic but ambitious and making sure that emerging markets and the context of emerging markets like South Africa, where we're based, in Africa in which we invest, is taken into account when we're putting together these plans.
Now, when we speak of just transition and the access to finance, COP26 went splendidly in that regard in terms of what promises could have been made. Now, COP27, people are not as hopeful after the fall meeting between World Bank and IMF with regards to how much can developing nations access from developed nations for climate finance. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think it's always discouraging when it seems like we're taking a step back, but I think it's important to remember that progress is still progress. Remember when we first started having these engagements, we were on track for a 6-degree world. Now we're looking closer to 3. It's still not perfect. We have a lot of work to do, but there is progress. I do think that the nature of the discussions we're having are promising. What I'm really excited about, though, is the idea of emerging markets, developing nations coming to the table with investment proposals. So there are definitely going to be projects that require philanthropy or grants, but we also have significant potential, especially in Africa, to produce really viable investment opportunities, and I'm excited to see those.
So you're basically saying a lot of mixed finance is going to make this happen for Africa. Coming back to South Africa, being one of the bigger developing nations around the world, which are still heavily coal dependent, and because they need it, and considering the energy crisis currently going on, what do you have to say about that? How is transition going to take place in South Africa in the current scenario, looking at other developed nations now depending on coal once again, despite there being a lot of talk about phasing it out completely?
Yeah, I think what's important to remember there in the context of the current short-term run on fossil fuels and particularly on coal is that none of that changes the long-term ambition. The long-term goal stated at a national level and internationally is still to get to net zero by 2050. That is still the objective. What I do think we need to acknowledge, though, is that in emerging markets in general and in countries like South Africa specifically, that's not going to be a linear guide path, right? It's going to probably have a peak, plateau, and then decline kind of situation. So we need to be cognizant of that reality. To understand that we're not going to meet that same sort of mapping of 7% down every year, but there will still be that strategy. That overarching long-term strategy is still very much in place.
My last question to you would be, Africa still, in terms of climate action finance, is receiving most of the money from outside in the form of DFIs. How can we maneuver this towards PIs very quickly? Because that is truly the need to make that quick transition for 600 million people at the moment not connected.
Yeah, I mean, that's the age-old question, right? And you get into sort of a circle of responsibility. So the investors will tell you there's capital but no projects. The project developers will tell you they've got projects but no investors. There's also going to be a question around policy and regulation, and is it creating an enabling environment for investment? I think that there's no one solution. It's definitely a collaborative approach. One of the things that's going to really help is the Just Energy Transition Partnership that's been set up for South Africa. It's acting as a pilot. If we can make this work, then I think it's a model that can be replicated and adjusted for nuance in other emerging markets. So we're really optimistic about that.
Where has Old Mutual stepped in terms of concessional finance? I'd make this my last question to you.
Yeah, that's also a great question. So, Old Mutual Investments is a number of different boutiques. I focus as Old Mutual Investment Group specifically on the listed equity side. And there we've taken a very strong stance that the way that we fix the stability and the sustainability of the market is by staying invested. So we've taken a very strong stance not to divest straight up from any of the sort of big polluters, but to stay invested and as a shareholder use that leverage to affect behavior change by those companies. So that's really where we're financing. I know that a lot of the banks in South Africa have done looks at sustainability linked bonds and things like that. But with us as a listed equity investor, we're saying, if you want this capital allocation in our portfolio, we need to see some change.
Great. Now for a quick and just transition. A lot of the talk is surrounding around philanthropic and also concessional finance. Nicole Martens just mentioned how Old Mutual is involved in that, and we're hoping to see a lot more of that, a lot more commitments here at COP27.